fully a working session. I'm going to literally spend 10 minutes to present something, and then after that I'm going to hand over to you to in groups work on like the developing a use case, so thinking through some of the challenges and so forth. And then the last part is to sort of is to start identifying the activities that we had here at the bottom, which I added to, so some general activities, but then reflection on learning, health systems, leadership, health, the professional, so the CAN-MEDS competencies, but any other competencies that you could think of that you can add as a possible activity. And then this could possibly be a resource that we all could use to think through giving students activities for their spare moments in the wards for our context. Okay, so I'll just share the link again, and you will see that at the top of the document, I created a space for group 1, group 2, and group 3 with possible, with 3 questions that you need to think through and answer that. And so I'm going to create breakout rooms once I've talked through a possible approach in terms of developing your case study and identifying that you can then discuss with your team members for about 20 minutes before we come back, and then get feedback from all the groups around what you thought about and yeah, what your findings were. Okay, so and basically if your group on Teams says 1, then you assign group 1. If it says 2, you're assigned group 2. I just know it does say 1, 2, 3. I just can't remember what the exact phrases it use. Okay, right. Any questions so far before I go through the customer mapping or student journey mapping? Okay, cool. So, as I mentioned, the aim of this is to develop a use case for thinking about why our students are not engaging with their spare moment in the ward. And we started unpacking some of that in, oh no, sorry. Oh, no, it's still there, sorry. And we started unpacking some of those there at the top. And also then the next question was how we could change our culture. But I thought we could each group spend a bit more time to really unpack that with the different findings. So in your group, you will then answer the 3 questions. And one approach I thought we could use to really think through those challenges is to think through the student journey and their experience on the platform, so in a ward, and what systems and structures and so forth they experience, and what might hinder them. So not just in the ward, but all the external factors. So mapping the journey of the student through the ward with the engagement with everything. So it's just thinking, like I said, I'm not going to go through this process completely, but the idea is just that you think, if you place the student in the middle within their experience going through the ward and what they engage with, and then come up with the systems and processes that might hinder them to engage with the spare moments and so forth. And we've already identified some of those components, like it might be that they need to study for tests and exams, or that they might be tired after a long day and so forth. But yeah, mapping that out fully. Okay, so I'm going to now, and I'll share this link as well if you wanted to have a full look at this, but I'll provide you with about 20 minutes to think through those 3 questions that I've shared with you. And I'm going to create the rooms now. Oh, or just before I do that, do you have any questions? Okay, great. So let's, oh no. Okay, I just realized I can't create groups because I haven't created this link. Hmm.
Hi, Yanis. Sorry, unfortunately, I do have to go. I have to go fetch my mother in Rosebank.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Simone.
Apologies, me everyone.
No worries. Thanks. Bye. Yes, Jenny.
Can I ask where the questions are? I can't see them. Can the others see them?
So the questions, if you click on the Google Docs link that's at the top, if you click that, you'll see it opens up group. It will open up the groups, and you'll see there's group 1, group 2, and group 3, and so forth.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think, how am I going to, sorry?
Thank you. I couldn't see it. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a call, and I'll just, how many people are we on the call? I'll just create different calls. Ashad, can I maybe ask that you create a group with Anne? So just create a call with Anne and Ania and Aviwe, and then I'll create a call with Catherine, Christine, Daisy. Oh, okay, they are quite a few. Otherwise, sorry, I think I'll just quickly get Angie to join and create the breakout rooms. Okay, just give me a second. So while I just sort out the breakout rooms, if you could just yeah, look at the question so long and think through that, I'll ask Angie to create the breakout rooms. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, because Angie sent it out with the marketing account, I just created a group. If so, Anne, Ania, Ashad, Abiwe, if you could join that link, I'll send the next link now. So you can start discussing those 3 questions. Okay, and there's the next links.
Hello, Johannes. How do you want to divide the groups?
Oh, I did. So I said you can join the Mervin, I think you're in the last group.
That's group 3 from what I
Yes.
see.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Mervin, Mohammed, Paul, Simakaleng, Tanya, and Sakani could join that group.
Group 3, Johannes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, I see group one's back. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very cool. Let me just send the others a reminder. Okay, team 3. Okay, group one's back, so just okay, right. So I think let's start with the first group and just get some feedback around what you discussed in your group with regards to the 3 questions.
Oh, was it 3? I thought it was 2.
Okay, well, the last question I think was around a strategy, but if you
Oh.
only got to 2, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. Well, for question 1, we figured that maybe the reason why students leave is because they don't feel included. Are they meant? Oh, thank you. uh, uh, please feel free to come in, colleagues, if you feel that I've left out a point. Yeah, they don't feel included. They feel excluded, and they just kind of need hand-holding in terms of what they need to do. Another reason why they might leave is because of uncertainty in the environment. They haven't been given an orientation. They kind of know what to do on campus, but when in the wards, they really, that's a different environment. So yeah, they haven't been oriented to the space. And also the issue of if they're not if they haven't been given a role model to show them how to actually speak to patients, etc., they might feel embarrassed. They're conscious of the fact that I don't know and I don't want to make a fool of myself in front of everyone. Yeah. Is there anything else that I've left out, colleagues? Oh, and also just a lack of motivation, just a general lack of motivation and interest in what they're doing.
So thanks for that. I don't know if the other group members have want to add something. So in your group, in terms of if we think about
that's question 1, sorry. We did come up with strategies. So we combined 2 and 3 in a sense. We said that we would give them tools so that they have agency. And some of these tools were alluded to in last week's session. Empower students in terms of where they can learn and from whom they can learn and how to ask questions. We also thought it was important that they're actually reflective on their own practice. So yeah, critically reflect on what they're doing. The other was to have their own learning objectives for the wards. So Avua mentioned maybe if they're not comfortable doing drips, they could have set a goal to say today, and we'll put up 2 drips. So they can have goals that they set up for themselves at the ward. And another suggestion was where their time is actually structured for them. Sometimes we assume that students inherently know that since I'm in the ward from this time to this time, I'm going to do this. And they might need assistance with time management. And the lastly was to scaffold their learning for them in the wards, a system. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you so much. Group 2, what was your findings? Anyone in group 2?
Dr. Zuckerman joined us later on. I can't see the notes that we made because there were quite a few points that were brought out. The biggest one is going to be the fact that, is that the notes for us?
Yes.
They feel they're not learning from it. They like they're being used and they don't feel as if they've used as free labor. And that's what I've tried to teach them. You're not free labor. You actually learn. If you do these tests, you're going to have to learn from them. And someone else suggested it can be intimidated because they think they're not supposed to do it, which is often true, but they don't try and do things on their own. There's a perception that there must be a qualified practitioner next to them, and they lack confidence, which is almost the same thing, and varies from student to student and from situation to situation. Some things they're not allowed to do on their own. And then Michelle Zuckerman came in too, and she was talking about the fact that they are left a lot on their own. And there's a shortage of staff in many of the hospitals, and the situation varies from one hospital to the other depending on the senior staff. The second lot with what do we need in our context to enable students to take ownership, have agency, direct our own learning, and to use spare moments in the ward. I haven't noticed many spare moments in the ward. They must communicate with patients. They've seen and build a rapport with them so they can actually speak to the patients and assess what's going on with them. Optional tasks was also a suggestion, make the patient information documents. The one lady suggested that her father had lots of documents in his practice, and maybe we should have documents available for the patients, get familiar with what the patients have available to them and judge whether the same resources are understandable for the patients themselves. That can be very important because even if they've got documents, it's not usually in all the languages and not all your patients can read. So it's got to be at a level that can be interpreted by everyone. Confidence building lessons, roadmap on the skills, what to do when I get into the ward, then what. Okay, that was the second group. And the third point here was research. When do they get spare moments, in what situation? So if we find out when they get spare moments and what they can do in that situation, then they can maybe use it better. Preparation for explaining ward work framework for the lecturers. I think that differs where you are. Some of us are just working as lecturers, but the people actually working in the hospitals are very, very busy. Critical thinking in the ward, they've got to analyze why they're being asked to do something, why they've been asked to do an examination, why they've been asked to do a radiological examination so they can learn to handle it. How to include learner-centered teaching to make them realize what they are looking at, why they are looking after the patient. And we've got to remember the workload of the consultants in the wards all over. In certain of the hospitals, they are just overloaded, and it's very difficult to do anything, which is not a very positive thing to bring. But that was from group 2. All right.
Thank you so much. And then from group 3.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, there we go. All right. So in group 3, let me make the bigger. Okay. All right. So just a moment. Okay. Yeah. So they have not been told what to do and do not feel empowered to take initiative. And then we also noted that they do not have goals. Like when they are in the hospital, what do they want to get out of the experience of just being in the hospital outside of meeting the academic requirements? And then there was the view that students struggle to be self-directed learners. They seem to need to be guided and at times struggle to be independent. They are always worried about assessment and are looking for all the answers in the book. And then they do not see value in spending time with patients unless it's for marks. And that boils down to they are not clinically orientated.
Mm.
And then the second part, thank you for scrolling. So we need to create opportunities for them to acquire the skills, not as technicians, but as clinicians. They need to know how to use the instruments and know how to care for them. All right. So not just, even if they don't have the opportunity to engage with patients, there are many elements of the hospital that they need to be familiar with, that they need to know how to use, where to find certain things, or who to speak to in the hospital to get access to those things as well. Allow them to real life experience under the guidance of the relevant person. So I think that part also requires coordination between the academic side and the clinical side as well. And then clinicians need to make time to find out from the students what they have learned during their free time. Then if you see, I think it was, can't remember who said this, but someone in our group said, if you see an interest, this is what she does. She says to her students, if you see an interesting case, let your fellow students know about it, sit down, discuss it, and that's another way they can productively use their time, their free time. Then letting them use a simple Gibbs reflection cycle, describing what they have done or practiced, stating their thinking or reasoning behind it, evaluating it, reasoning a new action plan, conclude, and describing a different outcome as well. And then moving on to the third question. So the biggest part is that the academic side as well as the hospital, they need to work together, because that's the only way students will be empowered, and that's the only way to facilitate a mindset shift, especially starting in what they are learning from the books during their academic sessions, so that they are able to transfer that and carry that into the clinical sessions as well. And yes, to emphasize that they are to see the human being first before they see what the person is, before their ailment. Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if from group 3 if I've left out anything, but I know before the session ended, they said I had captured everything. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Thanks. Is there any other comments or feedback on this before I ask my next question? So I think some of the things that if I look at all the groups that came out, is that orientation, which I asked as a question, that they're not orientated to the environment, that they don't have clear learning objectives or goal orientated, and that, that they don't really understand their role and what they're supposed to do and so forth. So if we think about everything that was discussed now, in terms of a bigger strategy and orientating students and so forth to give them a better understanding of what they're supposed to do and a better experience navigating the hospitals, what can we do to as a starting point to orientate them better? Anyone? Yes, Jenny, please go ahead. Oh, and Mervyn. Sorry, Mervyn first question, and then Jenny.
Okay.
Thanks. I think we've got to make them very aware that they are our colleagues and that they, in not very long, are going to share the same responsibilities, and that they have to hone their clinical skills in order to exercise those responsibilities in an efficient way. So I think we've got to motivate them to understand that although they don't have the experience, they are in essence actually our equals with less experience. And I don't think we're giving them that kind of power to know that we see them as colleagues and we respect the fact that their inexperience is acknowledged, and what we're trying to do is to change that attitude. So I think a lot of these questions hinges around our attitude more than the students' attitude. And we've got to motivate them either differently or better. Thank you.
Thanks, Mervyn. I think that's very valuable points. Jenny.
Okay, I agree with Dr. Jacobson. And in terms of orientating them, when the guys come to a new area, a new hospital, they usually are taken around and explained what they're going to do. And we spend time with them and try and make friends with them, not friends, but, to try and explain to them who they've got to report to and what they've got to do. And the instruments is a very important thing, because half of them, or most of them, have never seen half the things we have to use, especially in like a surgical specialty or surgical related specialty. So they've got to have that explained to them. Otherwise, I agree with Dr. Jacobson completely. They are colleagues and they don't need to be belittled. But I don't think they get much spare time anyway. But I think it's a very important concept. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was just reading through the goals and so forth. I don't know. So one of the things that the instructional designers have been working on is a handbook, like a course handbook that's an additional that goes alongside the course that explains the teaching philosophy and approach that we're trying to take, and that explains the technology that the students need to navigate. This is now more for online, but it could be something that, that in this ward, you'll have to work with this, and this. If we sort of outline the roles and responsibilities of the student in a handbook, do you think that is something as a starting point that could work?
With respect, I think handbooks are all very well and good as a reference, but I think we've got to lead by example.
No,
They've got plenty books. They can go online. They've got libraries. They've got access to literature, so they can read the basic principles anywhere. We've got to show them by being professional and by including them. And it's up to us as motivators, as part of our educational psychology. Thank you.
Thanks. And I agree with that. I think it's definitely a cultural shift that one has to make, and to start working on that. But how one goes about doing that, I'm not really sure. Yes, Michelle.
Hi, sure, I have, as always, thoughts that are all over the show. I think the reality, we have to take into account what the background is, and I don't know what the fix is. So our aim, or my aim, maybe I'm out of context, is they should be training them to be doctors and clinicians and critically thinking doctors. But my impression is that the background is that they haven't ever been, maybe I'm being a bit strong, but I'm trying to create a picture, maybe they've not ever been taught to think critically. And when we go on the ward rounds, or if I can quote an example of the case, they do a case presentation to me online once a week. And if I present the case and they presented to me last night, and their level of thinking, I actually was at a loss as to where to start. So what they're learning in the books and what they're learning and sitting and studying, they can quote to me all the stuff about, in this case, a febrile convulsion and all the criteria. Could they apply it appropriately to the case that they presented, which was a 4-year-old who'd had TBM 3 years ago, is on massive anticonvulsant therapy, who came in with the fit. They gave me the doses, and that's all they gave. And then the assessment is it's a febrile convulsion in a baby with no fever, who's got intracranial pathology, which is an exclusion criteria. And they did a full septic workup, including a lumbar puncture, and they put onto meningitis antibiotics. That's what they plan. I don't know what happened, and I didn't ask if it was discussed. But how do you teach them that the child who's a known epileptic post-TBM is on massive anti-epilepsy? You want to know what the fitting history is. You want to know, and the chances of the child, you cannot by definition call it a febrile convulsion, and Prof. Carla had done the touch with them. Where do you teach them to think, is the child being given the medicine? Is the dosing adequate? Maybe I want to know what the recent fitting history is. Is the child a poorly controlled epileptic or well controlled? But all I got was, as I say, that known child known with intracranial pathology, who's a CP post-TBM, who's on multiple anticonvulsants, including Keppra, which is nowhere near our first line, is having a febrile seizure. And they did a septic workup, including LP, and gave antibiotics. I was at a loss. How do you teach them to start thinking along the lines that is, I don't even know what to say. So that's, how do I teach them in the terms of their background, where they've come from, the clinical exposure or lack thereof that they've had in Cuba, and the fact that they are, in hospitals that are busy and that are well understaffed, and what does one do?
Thanks. That's interesting challenges to think through. Jenny?
Just to add to what Dr. Zuckerman said, I find this very often. The people, they can quote you everything word for word, almost from the book, but there's I'm not impressed that they actually understand what it means, and they don't know how to approach it. And I like looking at patients if I can with them, but you've got to have something that they can understand, because otherwise they're just going to quote things. And it led with anemias that I went and developed a whole story of a wooden factory, because the people would quote to me word for word exactly what anemia is, the definition, and you could see it didn't mean anything in their heads. So I agree with Michelle, and it's a difficult one, and I think we've just got to keep working on it and seeing that the people are trained and taught to think and question what they're taught. Don't know if you'd agree with that, Dr. Zuckerman.
So, well,
absolutely, Jen, I do. And what the answer is, I don't know. And I think the fact that, I don't know how they work in the academic hospitals and what the VIT student or the GEMP students are exposed to. I would imagine they're far more replete with consultants and registrars, or the specialty registrar, which might not be the case in the hospitals that are going. So all around, the challenges are huge.
So, yeah, so I think one of the things that we then have to add here is, how do we, use spare moments and so forth to develop critical thinking, what are the best approaches to do that? And I think it's obviously, we sort of leave this session hanging with just identifying some, problems with a few possible solutions forward, but I think this is something that we need to think about further, that needs a lot more discussion and thinking about how we can approach this. So I'm going to leave it there. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the session around creating activities, but if you have time, so I provided here with one example of you know, a health systems task that could be done. So you can either create, if you can think of activities that they could use for spare moments, specifically for critical thinking or any other thing like identifying the instruments and how to use the instruments, any type of activity that you might have, if you could add it to your on year with a description and yeah, tools that you could use. So I've created an example there as well. And then this is a document that we could hopefully use in the future to think through or to add activities to our teaching. I agree with making critical thinking explicit. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. I just want to know if there's any other closing comments. Otherwise, my question to you is, so now that we've defined it, what is our way forward?
Do you want an answer now?
No. It's to go think about it. But self-reflection.
Will we be sent a copy of this? Of these comments? Will you send it to us on email, or what you're going to do?
Okay, so I will I'll send it. What I'll do is I'll add the link to the document to the invite to the Outlook invite that we shared today, so you'll find it in there.
Thank you for a stimulating session and for making us pick up. And I think the whole thing we've done, all of us feel, is that people are just over busy, and I don't really see that they have that many spare moments. It's just difficult. Okay, but thank you for asking. Okay.
Thanks everyone. Have a lovely evening.